This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Two scientists born in China who lived and worked in the United States and became US citizens have now given up that citizenship to return to China. What has changed to make that a desirable option? The Chinese government has made efforts to attract scientists and other top talents to come to China. What are the rules and the results of the initiative? It's not easy for foreigners to get permanent residency in China, but what makes the country an attractive destination for people looking to expand their employment horizons? A closed society lacks flexibility, but can openness go too far when it comes to immigration? What's the right balance in promoting opportunity and protecting security?
Two prominent Chinese-born U.S. scientists have given up their American citizenship to become Chinese once again and become full members of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Nobel Prize winner Yang Zhenning and Turing Prize winner Andrew Yao Qizhi both now work at Tsinghua University, the Chinese equivalent of MIT, after spending many years in the United States. To discuss the scientists' return and the difficulties of foreigners in obtaining Chinese green card, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Xu Qingduo, current affairs commentator.
Well, they set up a good example for other Chinese scientists in the global science community, and also they send out a message to other scientists from other countries that China is a land of opportunities for your research and career development.
And Fajan Kamalabadi, president of the Future Trends Group.
Yes, and it is a statement about the situation that China opened up more and China is on the rise, and that they were received education early year, they must return. And also the Chinese have a saying, 落叶过根,
You speak very good Mandarin. And we shall also be talking to Professor Liu Ke via telephone. He is Dean of the Clean Energy Institute of SUS Tech and Vice Chairman of the National Association of 1,000 Plan Experts in Chinese 千人计划. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Gentlemen, in your estimation, what are your thoughts about their decision to give up the American citizenship? That's a big surprise for those who take American dream as the Chinese dream, meaning they want to go to the United States as immigrants.
Well, exactly. In terms of the number, only two scientists, it's a small move, but a significant move in terms of its impact. I would say, it symbolizes their understanding of the Chinese science community, the science development, science and research. Chinese government has basically invested hugely in this research and science development. And for a lot of young scientists, when they come back to China, they find these new facilities, modern facilities, and also the generous offering for their career development. They are attracted to the Chinese scheme, like talent scheme, all kinds of talent scheme. And also, I think the impact is tremendous, especially in the Chinese community, community of science, let's say.
Kazan, are you surprised by the sensational headline?
Not really, because I have met, of course, Yang Zhenning, and I think it's several statements. One is exactly as what you said, is not only value judgment, it's not only I want to help China, actually maybe China is offering better terms. Maybe they can develop more science, they are scientists, they want to get results. So it also a statement of whether China itself is emphasizing so much on science and is hiring people with better terms, not individuals, but a whole community. So I think...
But don't forget, when you give your analysis, which is of course very enlightening and interesting, don't forget Professor Yang Zhenning is 90 years old.
Yes.
He is so old, I'm afraid, in Chinese wisdom, he would not take the secular life as madly as the young people who would take materials,
no, for
ownership of cars
result.
and houses,
yes.
as their pride.
Yeah. not for personal
Secular
materials.
concerns may no longer be on top of the agenda, don't you think so?
I agree. I think it's mostly about the love of science and also the love of opportunities provided in the Chinese land. China is rising, and also Chinese scientific development is also rising. If you check the index of these published papers, academic papers, and also the scientific progress over the past years, you will see it's very impressive. I think it's a common consensus if you take a look at the global community, the response there.
When I spoke of the issue of material concerns, I expected you guys to actually criticize me, since as many of the postings on the social media pointed out, Professor Yang Zhening may have enjoyed a lot of material comforts, given the privileges you may think of, the glow of his reputation and all the success of his career development. But let me cross over to Liu Ke, who himself is a returned scholar and brilliant expert of energy studies. Hello, Liu Ke.
Hi, how are you, Yang Rui?
Hi, I believe you must have followed this story very closely. What do you think of the sensational nature of the story? Are you surprised that they have decided to give up the American citizenship? Do you want to follow suit?
I was a little bit surprised. Actually, I was a little bit surprised more for Professor Yao than Professor Yang. Right? It's really, as we know, like at Professor Yang's age, it's I think just symbolic. But meanwhile, I will make one point very clear, because I see the social media, also some of the comments in newspaper show this is showing Professor Yang loves the country, but I actually think we should try not to understand this way, because if that's true, can we say he does not love the country in last 94 years? So this is not a matter. I think this is his sole personal decision. I don't want to interpret too much one way or another. It's just a personal decision, because many people, like the Southern people, play experts. More than 50%, they still hold foreign passport. They kept to China. You cannot say those people do not love the country. Everybody has their individual decision, have their individual situations there.
We noticed that part of yours, excuse me, Luke, we are aware that you are one of the senior experts on the 1000 plan, and that's a brilliant initiative. We are aware at the same time that those who agree to come back to China, be it their motherland or not, are quite divided in terms of the demographic roadmap. They are either very old, above the age of 65 or 70, or pretty young university graduates. What's happened to those in between these two age groups? I mean, the adults in their 40s and 50s. Why do they refuse to come back? What are the major reasons, do you think?
Well, number one, there are certain portions still come back, like I'm 52. Not means nobody in that age come back. And number two, I fully understand why in that age, because you have your, they have their like sons or daughters, either in high school or in elementary school there. So when they come back to China, their sons and daughters were born in U.S. They don't even speak Chinese. They cannot get into school, and the international school in China is so expensive. So not everybody can enjoy that kind of benefit, have that kind of financial support, let them send their kids to international school. And another part, if you are not holding the Chinese passport, even you come back to work in China, there's a lot of social benefits, like medical insurance. The government cannot guarantee. So in that age, they have a lot of family responsibility. And plus, other like medical insurance, the retirement. So there are a lot of personal decisions they have to make. So we cannot judge those people that love or not love the country because they come back, or because they're turning to Chinese citizenship or not.
Thank you very much, Liu Ke, for joining us. What Liu Ke said in his analysis reminds me of a very sensational and famous novel that we read in the 1980s. It's called 人到中年. The considerations, practical considerations of adults in their middle age, because they have the family responsibility and they take care of the elderly, the young children. So life is pretty hard for them, and that's one of the major reasons, according to Liu Ke, that may have prevented more of the middle-aged, well-educated guys from coming back to China and render their service. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with him. I think, for the middle-aged scientists living in other countries, they do have not only a responsibility to do their own research in their own field, but also they have an obligation to their families, their wife, children, and also the parents you need to take care of. And it's not easy to make a decision to move to another country. And also it's not easy for them to live separately with their kids and wife, basically. So it's on one hand, it's individual decision. On the other hand, usually from my experience in terms of communicating with them, some of them, I know how much they love their, the country where they are from. Usually, like they spend years college or middle school in China, and then they went to overseas.
Now, Kazan, you were born in the Persian state of Iran. You grew up and educated in the United States. Now you came to China many years ago. What are your considerations for coming here in this host country, and do what?
Yes, I have been actually here over 30 years. That's longer than 1/3 of the Chinese friends. So actually, China has become my #1 country. I was 17 years in Iran, 11 years in US, and 30 years in China. So I came for service, for learning, for contribution, and not only just for money making, but I believe the borders are actually disappearing. So many Chinese go abroad, and some foreigners come to China. Some of the Chinese return. Some of the Chinese who are in China are growing in better opportunities than if they were in US or Europe. So it's not to say, oh, the only place that you can survive or grow or serve is the West, nor the reverse. So I think it is the shuffling of the world. And therefore, the borders need to be more open. More talents needs to be transferred. In fact, collecting talents is one thing, but contributing and receiving is also.
Chindo, excuse me, you look a little bit confused and bewildered when you are listening to his story, because for one reason, it's my hunch. I wonder if it's correct. I want you to correct me if you think I'm ridiculous. He is able to combine the what's considered the best of three civilizations, the Persian civilization, the American culture, and Chinese culture. Persian state regards itself as the best. The United States would look down upon the Persian state if you look at the economic sanctions. And China is rising so fast, and we are considered a civilization state, not a simple, small nation state. And therefore, do you see any clashes of the values that come from the three respective cultures? And do you feel that there's something alien in him that has driven you away, that makes you to keep a distance from him?
Probably not me, because we both speak English, and we both spent some time in the U.S. And also, besides, he speaks excellent Chinese. I think he spent.
But I'm afraid linguistic language cannot replace the language of values.
That's right, but also some of the values probably you could transcend cultures, like respect to people and be polite, good manners. That's the same in every civilization, in every country, probably.
Let's come back to examine. I know you have a long story to share with us about your personal experience, but let's look at Yang Jining. Do you think it's the sensational background of their marriage that has generated so much headlines and the front page coverage about the decision to give up American citizenship? It's the marriage between such a young girl and an old man.
Yeah, actually, I've met both. And for me, it is very natural. They are very normal, and they are very much in real. It is not fake, it's not unreal, it's natural that they have met each other. She is very good quality person. And so this story that the Chinese made a big noise about it and negative statements, I don't believe in it.
And what do you think of the driving force behind her decision to marry Yang Jining despite the huge age group, age distance? Is it love, respect, or worship? I mean, these are three separate different things.
First of all, he actually, even though he's old, he is energetic. He's very young. He's creative. So he's not like one of those old that cannot move things, cannot do things. He's very agile. Second, maybe she has both love and respect and wants to help. Service, we forget about the value of service in love. And also, they are actually compatible, I saw it. So, compatibility is not in, families have their reasons. Also, the choice to come here, he has been involved with China. I am part of a company called Bright Oceans Corporation, We actually donated $1 million to his program when he was at Stony Brook University for the space sciences. So he's received things from China, he's contributed to US, he's come here to contribute back to China. China's space science and astrophysics is going up. China has always been in this field quite advanced. Maybe if he was in a different field, he would not choose to come back to China. Because after all, a scientist's first love is not political, is not to make a statement, but to really advance the science. So the love for science and the chance to do it in China may be the first motivation than other things.
For that, he absolutely commands our respect. Mm-hmm. You are watching Dialogue with Qingdu and Kamala Bandi. We are discussing why two outstanding scientists decided to give up their American citizenship. In fact, it's a return to their ancestral land. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please.
CGTN shows you more, providing a fresh global voice you can trust.
And a different look at the world you won't find anywhere else.
We offer unparalleled coverage of Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
We present diverse perspectives on news and newsmakers from around the world.
We want to engage our viewers with stories that represent the complete picture.
We want to share with you ideas that matter to us all.
The stories, the people, the issues.
A new and balanced perspective.
CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. There are new rules coming into effect about the foreign workers in China, which will try to rationalize further the system now in place by creating a point system of attributes and abilities. Qingdu and Kamala Bandi. Now, such a system is designed, for example, to attract brilliant professionals. And how do you view the changes and their likely effects in our policy?
Well, I think this point system, I see it positively. This is another step forward, basically, to better manage the immigrants from other countries in China. If you look at the system, which is actually very similar to the point system of immigration in Australia, in Canada. So you depends on your educational background, depends on whether your proficiency of your English, of your language, and then you get a basically classification of your point. Here in China, you have like ABC classification. Basically, for A type, that is like you have a point of above 85. For B is above 65, and then C is basically under 60, depending on your education, language level of speaking Chinese, things like that, salary, etc. So I think this is basically toward the overall goal of China to build this country into an innovation-driven economy. You need scientists, you need top-notch talents come back to China to help this country.
I wonder if you still remember Edwin Ma, your former colleague who
Yes.
used to work for CRI but switched to CCTV News at least 10 years ago. He recently retired. But don't you think his story is pretty inspiring, because he won several times the Prize of Honor from the Bureau of Foreign Experts of the State Council, and that story about his career in China, his stay in China, must be very inspirational for many other foreigners who want to come here and take a look and perhaps decide to give up their citizenship in Europe or the United States.
Yeah, we were once colleagues. I have huge respect for Edwin Ma. He's a professional, let's say. He works for CRI, he works for CGTN, CCTV News previously. And he, this is my job. I will do it, try my best to do it in a good way, professionally. And so this is where I'm working. And he was once under criticism, actually, for working with the Chinese organization. But I think he did very well in response.
Right, he said in his response, he is not here to criticize China, or he just wants to help China and help the journalism. So we are beneficiaries of his example to
Yes.
practice good journalism. In fact, so this part of our interview is actually devoted to Mr. Edwin Ma, a very close friend of so many of my colleagues, presenters and moderators here. He did a wonderful job for CCTV News
Absolutely.
and CGTN. So what do you think of the potential impact of such a policy attracting more talented professionals? So, because in the 21st century, the success of a country would largely depend on whether you have the ability to attract those who are willing to serve.
Actually, in the world, there are two trends. One is called lifting up and taking away the walls, and one is about building more walls. And the direction that takes away the walls will win. So that means...
Are you critical of President Donald Trump,
Well, I
who
am
vows to erect a war along the border with Mexico?
The world has an arrow, the flash of history. And the flash is about unity, openness, and China has taken that route. But China is doing it in stages. So when you lift up policies, more foreigners come in, but selectively, and maybe don't think because we have 1.4 billion population, we shouldn't open the citizenship for foreigners. You should open more. Let more come in, and they will be faithful to China.
Well,
So
the
I think that
hallmark
it's-
of globalization is, of course, the free movement of the people.
Exactly.
But we have had visible and invisible wars. Visible wars like the Berlin Wall that came down in 1991. With that came the end of the Cold War. We also have the invisible war. A visible war could also actually include the war that the Israeli government erected to prevent the Palestinians from coming into their homeland. And President Donald Trump wants to erect a war along the border with Mexico. Invisible war could be ideological and religious, cultural differences. Today, China is still examined with an ideological lens. Many in the West still call China a communist regime. That may have sort of twisted the image of China and may prevent them from objectively examining why China is successful economically. Are you surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised. I think even for those people who don't have much to criticize about China, they have a misunderstanding or lack of understanding of coming to China to work. For example, in the science community, like people from European countries, they would not think about like working in China. They would say, "Oh, that's China. I'm not sure. I don't speak the Chinese language. Whether I can survive for 1 month or not, I'm not sure." So they have this kind of concern or fear. This fear is actually comes from this misunderstanding or lack of understanding. When they come back here, when they see the offer, usually the funding and the opportunities, usually they are attracted to coming back to China.
When I was studying in the United Kingdom between 1994 and 93, some of the Israeli classmates of mine said, "Yang Rui, does China have a supermarket?" And some of the Europeans even said, "Yang Rui, do Chinese men still wear pigtails? And what do you think of the lily food of Chinese women?" So we have the Forbidden City, we have the Great Wall, and we have the Summer Palace. Now these things may come across as cultural barriers that prevent more Westerners from adopting an objective perspective in examining the new realities here and the curve of evolution.
You can say basically in the 21st century, you can say the world has not yet met each other. It's only 100 years that by planes we are traveling, and it is 100 years that we are interliving among each other's civilizations. So it's too early stage, but this trend is going to open much more. So, I mean, the Chinese, the new Silk Road, that means 50 million Chinese will be going out the next 10 years. But at the same time, there is Shengaiwei, there is a more deep opening of China. I said the opening of China in the past 40 years is like a toothpaste opening, very little. The next one is the whole walk lift is being opened. So China is welcoming now, foreign and also overseas Chinese. And at the same time, now, as we said, America is trying to build walls. So this is very ironic. A civilization that classically was very what we call liberal is becoming conservative, and the civilization that
Kazan, we don't want to sound too smart and high-sounding. Let's look at some of the specific policy options that may be taken by the Chinese authorities. For example, what about the visa policy? What about granting more green cards to those who love China? Considering the sizable population of 1.4 almost, we only gave quite a few hundred green cards to overseas, expats here.
Let's say that's too little. I think we can afford to have more talents from other countries to come to work for China, work in China. And because there are a lot of opportunities for people from, say, other countries, if they can find the job and if they can work here, stay here legally, I think our country should probably assist them in the procedure of coming to China. Because remember, China is not a nation of immigration, but still, we can definitely make a good use of their contribution and even welcome to become part of China.
One embarrassing and tough question, gentlemen, is whether many Chinese do have their sense of racial discrimination. For example, we see more Africans in Guangzhou, and some local media is critical of their alleged troublemaking. Now, the understatement may suggest clearly that we feel uncomfortable with Africans or other minority groups. So do you think it's time for the Chinese to seriously reflect upon their own vulnerability, their weakness, whether they are ready to embrace immigrants?
Actually, there are two Chinese. There are those who actually love foreigners and take care of the foreigners, and they go out of their way to love foreigners to the point that other Chinese are angry about it. And then there are those who have prejudices. It is both exists. And of course, like Africa is not minority. Africa is a majority. So we consider that as a minority.
But there are minority
yes,
group in Guangzhou,
yes,
yet another first-tier city.
Even among the foreigners, there are majority in Guangzhou. So it is very interesting. The word minority comes from the West and understanding that the black were the minority there. So that word itself, I want to
Qingduo, you are thinking very seriously about the issue whether China has some elements of racial discrimination.
Well, remember not how long ago there's this TV commercial about a black guy being washed into a white guy. That's basically a commercial, I think, for washing powder, things like that. There's a lot of discussion whether there's a demonstration of racism, or that was basically some of the Chinese people or East Asian people. They have this preference to the fair skin rather than black skin, dark skin, let's say. But I think definitely there's a certain portion of racism in some Chinese. But in general, I would say, especially in bigger cities, I see this openness of a lot of Chinese people basically welcoming the foreigner to come to be our friends, to live as a neighbor, to work as a colleague.
Yes.
But I don't think, I'm not supposed to give my own personal views, but to my knowledge, I've done some homework and research. With regard to African brothers and sisters, we have the official policy, and we have the non-governmental attitudes from some of the Chinese who are not well educated, who may have developed some sort of a bias against our African brothers and sisters. Is that true?
Yes.
Should we examine the picture from these two perspectives?
Yes, not only towards foreigners, sometimes to minorities, maybe from Guizhou or Xinjiang or Tibet, sometimes they have that. But most of the Chinese prejudices is more benign, is not harmful like places where people
Perhaps
have
you are
opinions.
a little bit too benign and benevolent to the Chinese.
I have noticed it. They
we should learn from Lu Xun
to
be more critical of our own national character and the vulnerability of Chinese culture. Is that time for us to...
Yes, I agree. We should be critical of ourselves and always check if there's something wrong with us. There's no problem with that. I think we should do that more often, probably. But remember also there's a regional preference, or what do you call it, like regional bias, like people from a certain province, a certain region. Other people would have this bias against them.
But today, with the free movement of people in regionalization or globalization, particularly with the start of market economy in China, we have so many so-called provincial people, 外地人, coming to Beijing, Shanghai. So you cannot just say, look,
it's
this
relative.
regional
It's relative.
bias.
Right.
But it still exists.
It does. Yeah,
exist.
I agree. It does. I think I would encourage people to be open-minded and to basically welcome the differences instead of rejecting the differences.
Well, of course, we are extensively discussing many other things, not only just the decision by Professor Yang Zhening and Yao Jiji to give up the American citizenship. Tomorrow, we'll follow up on what we've been discussing here about immigration and why China should further open itself up to embrace more talented professionals for modernization. Tomorrow, the same time, goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
I'm Zhongxu, live in Beijing. This is The World Today on CGTN. We begin with breaking news in Iraq, where government forces have taken control of Mosul airport on the southern edge of the city for the first time since Islamic State overran the region back in 2014. Security forces hope to use the airport as a launch pad for a major operation against ISIL in the west of the city. The operation comes just 1 month after Iraq ousted the militant group from eastern areas. Officials said only around 2,000 ISIL fighters remain in the jihadists' last stronghold in the country.